Well, welcome to another episode of repairs to this poor old Triumph 2500 Mark 1. In the last episode you might have seen me pull the motor out. It is now sitting here on a couple of trolleys, gearbox and all. So the next step is to start pulling it apart, and well, I'll get it off these trolleys to start with, as it's a bit wobbly, and then pull a few things off it, and probably pull the head off first. I know that's a bit odd, but if I pull the head off while the gearbox is still on, the whole thing's fairly stable sitting on the ground with the gearbox on, and the head bolts are fairly tight, so you know. After the starter motor and a few other doodads, I'll get the head off and then the gearbox and all the other things, and hopefully by the end of this episode, no guarantees there, this engine will be on an engine stand, and who knows, maybe even pulled apart. High in the sky, I think. So we'll see how we go. So let's get on with it. Alrighty then, first thing I'm going to do is take this starter motor off. I'm going to need access to the flywheel. Try and lock the flywheel up so I can undo that big nut at the front of the engine. Now, how far do you go when you're doing this sort of thing? Now, this starter motor, you got to pull the extractors off and the carburetors and what have you in order to get it off when it's in the car. So do I take it to an auto electrician and have him check it out? Working perfectly fine, but do I really want it to go in 6 months time and have to do a whole lot more work on it? Having said that, I seem to remember the last time this starter motor was off and at an auto electrician, it was a matter of can't get parts for this stuff, sort of thing, buy a new one. Those bloody reduction ones. I think he just, at the time, I think he might have put another solenoid on it and cleaned it up, put it back together. It's been working fine ever since. So, if that is indeed the case, I'm not sure there's much point other than, I suppose, sort of cleaning it up again, and maybe, yeah, who knows. So maybe it's worth doing. I'll have to think on that. And of course, this is supposed to be a bit of a budget rebuild, so you know, how far do you go? You know, do I go buy, you know, those reduction starter motors? I don't know how much they are. I should imagine they're not cheap now. I think it was in the $300 odd mark last time I bought one. It was the TR7, and that was a very long time ago. I reckon there's a good chance that it'd set me back $500 or more. Who knows? So that's a decision to be made. Now there's a sticker on here. Alright. 2012. This starter motor had some work done on it. Alright, I might take this water pump off. The whole housing. The other thing, of course, is the alternator. It's a lot older than the starter motor. So, do I pull it off as well? It's off. I mean, do I take it to an auto electrician and have it rebuilt? I know what, in this day and age, an auto electrician will probably say, buy a new one. Alright, let's get this tappet cover off. Now this tappet cover's got one of these fancy plastic modern sort of gaskets on it, so it's a reusable thing, in as much as it hasn't been on there very long. Now, I've never rebuilt a 2500 Triumph engine. I've done a few dollies. Dolly Sprint motors. One in the TR7 was a full rebuild, and the one in the dolly, the current one, hasn't been started yet, that's a full rebuild. And then there was a couple of others in a road car that I had at one point that I sold as part of my retirement downsiding, unfortunately. So the setting up of the engine is a bit of a concern to me. I've watched a YouTube video, and on the right and proper over the top way of doing it with a, what do you call a timing degree wheel thing on the front, blah blah blah. And I used to work at a tape college, and I used to watch the students do that. But hopefully this is a budget rebuild, and so I'm hopeful that there's marks on the pulley, the timing chain pulleys, and so I want to get the engine on top dead centre is what I'm getting to, and then hopefully there'll be some marks that I can use to line it all up to put it back together, hopefully, but it's not something I don't, yeah, we'll worry about that until it starts up again, won't we? Oh my goodness. Okay, rudder button's pointing at number 1. The piston is up the top, and these two valves are shut. I reckon we'll call that top dead centre, don't you? My limited knowledge of some of these things, but alrighty, I think the next thing to do is to undo the head studs and I'll get the rocker gear off, get the head studs off, and get the head off. And I can probably go ahead and take the gearbox off and all the other doodahs. Let's get on with it, eh? I changed the rocker shaft on this engine not all that long ago. Someone suggested to me that it might have a part to play in the problems I was having with the blow-by. I didn't think that would be the case, but you gotta sort of try everything sometimes, even if it doesn't seem to be very likely. It did need changing. It was pretty worn. The theory was that being worn it was ending up with a lot more oil at the top of the engine, and then that was getting sort of blown out in the catch tank and out through the filler cap, that changing it didn't help. Hence the reason we're doing what we're doing. At the back of the head here, there's this modification that feeds more oil up to that rocker shaft. It was another thing that a number of people told me to either disconnect or do away with or whatever. That didn't make any difference either. Anyway, I got to disconnect that, and it's an odd size spanner. I've got to get this thing on an engine stand. I can't work on the ground like this. Too bloody hard. The camera's probably not going to really show this, but oh well, everything doesn't look too bad. Sort of no great scratches or anything, but it is pretty glossy in there, and there is a ridge. Yeah, you can definitely feel a ridge in there. So yeah, on the other hand, piston doesn't slop around like the dolly did when I pulled it apart. The head is a bit unknown until I clean it up. First glance looks pretty good. Back two cylinders look like they've been running lean, or the first four have been running rich, one or the other. I'll clean it up, see what happens. I'm just going to take all these head studs out, basically because they're in the way. Just going to put two nuts on, lock them together and try and get them out that way. Well, it's decision time, and well, it needs to be rebored. It has quite a lip on it, so it's going to have to be bored out. Let's hope the crank's in good nick. It doesn't require grinding. Anyway, let's get a few more. In that case, a whole lot of stuff more has to come off it than what would have come off. So let's get on with that. Alright, this engine's on top dead centre at the moment. Now it's going to be bored. It's going to go on off and have an acid bath. It means everything's got to come off the thing. So I'm going to pull this timer chain cover off and see if there's any marks from the manufacturer that lines everything up. If that's the case, I'll take some photos of it and so I don't get it wrong. If it's not, I'll have to sort of mark it somehow. So let's get this timer chain cover off. Okay, what's happened here, I've done the best I can. There's two marks here. Two marks here, they line up with these teeth here, and those line up with those teeth there. Now, I've hit them with a pin punch and put a white daub on them, which won't survive the cleaning process, but I'll keep refreshing it after I've cleaned it. This top mark up here is lining up with this bolt here. This mark here and this mark here is where the bolts are in, to make sure I don't use those holes. And that's with the droop in the timing chain at that point. So hopefully I won't stuff it up. Well, it's another day and another day of working on this poor old Triumph 2500. And well, today it's continue on working on this engine. Need to get it completely apart. Decisions made, it's got to go and get rebored because it's got a bit of a lip, or I think a fair bit of a lip on top of the cylinder there. So let's get on with it. But before I get on with it, when you're doing this sort of thing, it's amazing what sort of a mess you make. I keep a tidy shed. Well, my goodness, between the dolly not being fully back together and this thing coming apart, there's ice cream containers and bolts and nuts and things and bits of car everywhere, and I'm going to make it worse by pulling this apart. Anyway, let's get on with it. A lot more has to come off this engine than I originally hoped for. This is where the oil fuel pump used to bolt on. It's got an electric fuel pump on it. This is just a plate covering up the hole. I probably would have left this here given the budget rebuild I was planning. But now it's going to go and have an acid bath. Yeah, I'm going to have to replace the gasket that's in behind here. Now, because this engine's going to have a big rebuild now, it's going in an acid bath, I need to get everything off it. Things I weren't going to take out before, I was going to sort of rely on my luck and hope. Now, I don't know what this thing's called. It's like a buckety looking thing that the camshaft pushes up and the push rod goes in there. Now, I've heard some people call them tappets. Now, that's not what I call a tappet. Rocker gear is, or what I've always called tappets, but anyway, whatever this thing is, it's down in there. Now, I wasn't originally going to take these out. I wasn't going to take the camshaft out. Well, now I have to. Now, I just turned the engine upside down, get the sump off. One of these fell out. Now, I know they've got to go back where they come from. So again, I've got a bit of cardboard with numbers on it. This one fell out. I've worked out where it came from. I've worked out that it's in pretty good nick. So therefore I'm not buying new ones. So I do need to keep track of where they come from. This is number 6. And it also means I have to get these out in order somehow. I was going to tip it upside down, and I thought once I got the camshaft and the crankshaft out I'd be able to get to them. But if they're going to start falling out on me... Now this engine's a 2.5 litre, so this is a sometime in the 70s engine out of a Mark II 2500. No idea what model, but assuming it's sometime in the 70s. Now the Dolly's engine is a 76 model, or thereabouts, and in the casting of these sort of bearing doohickeys, cap things I think you call them, the numbers actually cast into them, what one they are. Quite large casting. I can't see anything on these, whether it's casting. Okay, there's... Never seems to amaze me how engines... Now this engine was running really quite well. Started first thing all the time, didn't blow blue smoke, good oil pressure. All it was doing was pushing oil out through the filler cap. So that tells you it had blow by. But the Leak down test said things were pretty good. Compression test said things were pretty good. Pull it apart, there's a lip on top of the cylinders, and this bearing's a bit on the buggered side. So much for a budget rebuild. I found the number 1 on here. So there's 1, 2, a dodgy 3, but you can make it out, and a 4. So it's numbered along the side of the block. But these, and one of these is only just numbered. The others may have them on and it's under the grease, I don't know, oil and muck that's in here. But I'm just going to mark them in such a way that I know how they go on. Well, it seems to me that to get the crankshaft out, you got to take the backing plate off, and the backing plate is on there because it's the only way to put the engine onto the engine stand. So I think that means I'm going to have to lower the whole thing down onto the ground, get it off the engine stand before I can get the crankshaft out. Oh joy, oh happiness. Well, it's another day and another day of working on this engine, and my goodness, it's not cooperating. Didn't do much filming yesterday, got a bit preoccupied with working on it, and it got very messy, and that makes it hard to handle the cameras. And a lot of it was just pretty boring stuff. But the crank wouldn't come out while on the engine stand, and the cam wouldn't come out, and now the wash plugs are not wanting to come out. So all in all, it's not cooperating. Anyway, there's still more wash plugs to get out, so let's get on with it. Well, I've sort of worked out another way to get these wash plugs out, and that's to drill a whole series of holes around the edge of it, get a screwdriver in there and sort of bend it, and with the screwdriver still in there, actually knock the Welsh plug in. The screwdriver stops it falling down into the engine, and then get a pair of multi-grips on it or something and get it out. And that's that. That took about, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes at the most. But yesterday I was spending half an hour or more on some of them. So, will I ever have to pull the Welsh plug out again? So is this pearl of knowledge on how to do it any of value to me? Well, that's about it for this episode of repairs to this poor old Triumph 2500 Mark 1. The engine is off at the engine reconditioner. He'll be boring it out and grinding the crank, and then I'll build the engine. He did measure it for me when I got it there, and it's already 20 thou over from a previous rebuild. Must have been before I got it. So it's going to be 40 thou over, he thinks, and the crank hasn't been ground at all, so that'll be 10 thou, like bigger bearings, thicker bearings. But I'm not buying the parts yet. I'll wait till he's actually done it. That'll be 3 weeks to do that, and another couple of weeks to get the parts, so a bit of a delay, but not much. There's so much to do in cleaning and painting parts, and it's just so much to do that I don't think it'll matter. I've still got plenty to do in those 5 or 6 weeks. So that just about brings us to the end of this probably fairly boring episode because nothing much happened. I kept forgetting to turn the camera on, or I was covered in grease and handling cameras to move them and what have you, so it probably won't turn out to be much of an episode. But that brings us to the end of the episode, so tune in, same duck time, same duck channel, for more mechanical mayhem on this poor old 2500 Mark 1. And that's when you'll probably see me working on the gearbox. I've got a rebuilt gearbox that I had rebuilt some months back, but I've got to use the overdrive unit out of the gearbox that's come out of the car, so the overdrive needs to come off. Now, I've done that a few times over the year on the dolly. I've never had really much trouble, even though people have told me there can be problems, but we will do it and see. Bye for now.